This episode of the Ottawa Entrepreneurs Podcast is brought to you by Extension Marketing, the marketing agency that specializes in unique needs and budgets of small to medium-sized businesses. They provide turnkey marketing solutions that get results. You can find out more today at extensionmarketing.com. Now here's your host, Pat Whalen.
Thanks for coming on the show today, Chris. Appreciate you taking the time.
No, thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Why don't we start off, if you can share with our listeners who you are and what your company is, please.
So my name is Chris Schwarz. I'm the founder and director of performance with FitQuest, which is a Eastern Ontario-based sports performance. We do athlete performance and injury management. So we do a lot of collaborations with surgeons, agents, doctors, sort of in an area where, my background being from strength and conditioning with the Senators and in the NHL for 15 years has kind of led me down this path to open up a business. The business has been in around for about 15 years now. And again, we've been growing and growing.
And Chris, were you running the business concurrently? Like, was it a kind of a side hustle or part-time while you were working at the time for the Senators, or two separate entities, two separate things?
Yeah, no, we were, I was running it at the same time, obviously more on a very part-time basis. And in terms of keeping up with the protocols and the programming, there was a need for it. I think, one of the advantages of doing what I did was I was looking at, what are the top athletes doing in the world, and then how were kids and young athletes developing. I was a professional athlete myself. So I obviously with kids that were in the age of developing athletes, it was something I was really interested in.
And how did you get involved in the strength and conditioning side of things in the first place?
Well, I'm a kinesiology graduate. But again, being in the realm of volleyball and being a professional volleyball athlete, the way that sort of got into it was one of my friends, Adrian Aucoin, who was a close buddy of mine. I was training with him, and I was training with a bunch of other athletes. They liked the way that, the type of programming and the way that I was building athleticism, and that sort of stunk into one thing, started training more athletes. Then, that springs into opening up another business, which is the Ottawa 67 Sports Performance Center, along with Brian and Adam. And then lucky enough to get going, and Ted Nolan asked me to come work with the Islanders for a couple of years. So I worked 2 years with the Islanders, and had an opportunity to come back with the Senators, and was with Senators for 13 years and never looked back.
And was it a tough decision for you to leave that world and go out on your own, like completely all in?
Yeah, I think it was, but it was kind of the calling. I'd been in lots of situations before. One of the things that really would change me, as a friend of mine was a cardiologist. I went and spoke on elderly management of exercise, and at the end of it, he says, why aren't you off doing this somewhere full time and really getting into it? At the time, I was doing some consulting in pharmaceuticals at the same time, as well as running the business on the side again. And, just basically asked my wife if she wanted to go down and live in Long Island. And it's as long as she was good with it, then we were good. And I ended up down there, and not looking back.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, what was your decision process like to go into that full time?
Well, again, like everybody else, it's, you're leaving something for an unknown. You're going down to another country, those type of things. But, the opportunity to me was always, if I don't do this, what will I feel like in 5-10 years from now? And also, I always came back to it. I think I had enough skill sets that even if I failed at that, over the years, I built enough range and skill set to be able to say, you know what, I'll get another job. I'll find something else. We'll make it work, And we were young enough. Our kids were young. It was a bit of an adventure at the time, to go down and live in Long Island, live on the beaches and be down there. That was something that, my wife and I really said, we want that experience. I'd gone over and played Europe, did the exact same thing when I played volleyball. I just picked up and said, I'm going to go over and try this thing. And I did it for 3 years. Then at the end of the 3 years, I said, that's enough. So I think most of the people that I see now they're a little bit afraid this was a calculated thing. Like I never worked in the AHL. I needed to know that I need to pay the bills to go down and work in the NHL. So it was a calculated risk, but one I'm glad I took.
And who would now for this not new venture, but for this venture now that you're involved with, who are you targeting? Like what would be a great customer for you? What does that person look like?
So the person, like we say that, our customers are actually the parents of athletes. Our consumer is the athlete, the young athletes themselves. So majority of our athletes are somewhere between 12 and 18. But, we're still, I still working with Mark Stone, Eric Carlson, Cody CC, and dropping a bunch of names here. I don't think they'll mind it. And AJ Greer, we've got Max Hendricks Lapierre, a bunch of guys that you would know that have gone over to Europe and come back. So we do have the older, the 30 plus guys, but majority of our would be somebody coming in and looking for advancing their athlete development, their performance, maybe coming off an injury, because we are affiliated with some sport medicine clinics that we work in collaboration with them. But though that would be probably 80% of our clients would be between 12 and 18.
And so obviously it's the parents making the decision as to whether or not to purchase your service. How do you get to those? How do you get your message across to those parents, or do you go to the kids first and hope that the kids tell the parents?
Well, again, a lot of our stuff is partnering with. We also partner with Canada Athletics, so we'll work in collaboration with other coaches for them done. It's just the type of business that there's a lot of businesses are. If you're not on the same values with your referring people that you're referring into you, then it's really tough to keep those clients and get them to understand what you're doing. Part of what we do is we try to, I really have this big emphasis on, and we have this big emphasis on build the athlete from the bottom up. So we're trying to develop athletes. As you know, social media can take over where people just sort of chasing butterflies and unicorns, right? Which is, they want to get to third base, but they're still standing on first. Kind of another analogy. So once people get to understand that we're gonna work through where they're at, and just meet them where they're at from athlete performance, from a mindset point of view. Like also, sometimes just telling parents that your child's not ready yet. We get sometimes people coming in at 9 years old and they want me to train them one-on-one. It's, I don't know, let them play baseball, let them play soccer. The tap will open a little bit more on what we do when they get into 12, 14, 16. That's where we can really come in and add value.
You're in an interesting industry in that I don't know if there's any industry that has more misinformation in it, especially online, than yours. So that must be a challenge for you, or is it more of an opportunity when you're talking to a parent for the first time? I'm sure they've done all kinds of research and various, nutrition and training programs and things like that they think will work when you in fact know they may not work. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, it's the old analogy of running over $100 bills to pick up nickels, right? And it's these you see it again, coming from a background of social media. When we first started, and you and I worked together, and how would somebody know how good you are? Well, you've worked with certain clients, you've gone through, you have the background of it, right? I always tell people, I don't know a lot of physicians that are running around telling people how good they are. And sometimes that's a good thing, like we have so many good people out there, and I know a million, as you do, that are really good, really qualified people, but maybe they're not self-promoters to the point, or they haven't worked. Like the lucky thing for me, and I would say, is I've worked with professional teams before. So it does give me a little bit of credibility within the community when we discuss things. But what I would try to tell people is, you're just getting flashes again of, just do this, and it's hacks, get your child to be an NHL hockey player in 24 hours, and it just doesn't work, right? And you try to tell people that. I will tell you what I ask you. Sometimes I ask parents when they come in, or people who come in, I ask them if they're crazy and they know they're crazy, or they're crazy and they don't know they're crazy, right? Because we're all a little bit loopy with our kids, which is totally fine. We want the best for our kids. It's when you don't understand that some of the decisions you're making may affect them long term. So, and again, just values, you can see the values that certain parents have. I have we as a company have a very strong value on building leaders. And, I'm very interested in academics. So I want to make sure the kids are coming through, and you don't just tell me, well, I'm an athlete. That lasts a certain period of time. So if the kids are the parents are sort of getting an understanding of what we're all about. And, we want, as we do as parents, we want to leave our kids with somebody that's going to nurture them more than just train them, coach.
You're interesting, the analogy you gave of, being an NHL player in 24 hours.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm in the marketing agency business, and we fight the same kind of battles. And I'm curious if there's something similar here between our two businesses, in that a lot of the clients we work with, they want instant results, when in fact they got to put in the foundational work first and then build upon that. I assume your industry is the same. And do you run up against that as well, that kind of instant results mentality?
Yeah, I think we definitely run into it. Again, it's, drawing upon 30 years of experience of actually doing this. I've seen the ups and downs. I can see that, we've all gone through the trends of what people want to tell people to do. Like, again, I need to go run down to the States and get my son tested for this. Well, your child doesn't eat breakfast. So you're running down there. Why don't you take some of those resources, and we set you up with somebody who's going to tell you the truth, who's actually got a degree in this, has done it for a few years, knows how to coach it, because there's also the other side, right? Where there's people, I think, flashing PhDs and, those types of things. I like the old analogy, poor, hungry, and driven is what probably got me to where I am. That's my PhD. Obviously with the backgrounds and doing those things, but we run into it all the time where a parent comes in, just examples of, they've been just mulling it over, and somebody telling them, well, if you're just here at 6 a.m. every morning, Johnny's going to be an NHL hockey player or become an NBA basketball player. And look, he shows up at school. He's not very good at school all day. He's not faster on the ice or better on the court at the end of the day. Yet we just get this idea of busy, and people just keep promoting it, right? It's just, as long as you can distract people these days, sometimes, those are the guys, people that are winning are the ones that can sit down and distract more than actually teach and coach and move the big rocks.
And let's face it, it's pretty easy for all of us today to be distracted with all the different feeds coming in our way, feeds of information, no matter what industry we're in or what we're researching or what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Chris, let's switch topics a little bit here and talk about
Sure.
entrepreneurship. So, I mentioned to you before we went live, there's a couple of questions I like to ask everyone, every guest. So our first one today is, what advice would you give to someone has a business that may be struggling? Because as entrepreneurs, we all go through that phase. Any advice you'd like to share?
I think the hardest thing is, especially like in my industry itself, is that people just don't want to ask for help. They just don't want to search out people and ask, I'm a strength and conditioning coach. What did I know about business, right? And I had to ask people that know more about it, get them to poke holes in things and really sit back and self-assess and say, these people are giving me feedback. It's like I tell my kids, the kids that come in here, I said, who gives you, you guys don't like feedback anymore. And who gives you feedback? Your parents, your coaches, your teachers. And who really cares about you? Oh, your parents, your teachers, your coaches. I kind of took that from Dave Smart, who's a good buddy of mine. But that's something as an entrepreneur, I think, again, we just don't ask enough of. There's so many good resources out there that aren't going to cost what you think. I would also say invest in good people, meaning the marketing side of things. Invest in people that know more than you do, and then be able to release it, because it's hard not to, as an entrepreneur. Everybody wants to be in control of everything.
Why do you think we struggle with asking for help as entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I don't know if it's ego. I mean, you read ego is the enemy, those types of things that are egos get in the way and think that you've done that, you can do everything. I recently took some executive coaching on this as well, in amongst all this and the health side of things. And I think it's letting that, you always want to create that. In the NHL, when I was in the NHL, I came out as an entrepreneur, and I thought, when you're in pro sports, you just take that space, right? So you got to have drive to do what we do every day to be an entrepreneur, but sometimes you just got to leave that space open and let other people come in and give input. And as an executive coach, that taught me, because I was in a room, I was in a room with, in a Zoom call with 8 other females, 2 other males, and the females really, I'm gonna tell you, they really showed me how to step back and be a leader and say, they just gave space. They let people take that, right? Where I just came out of a field where it was just, you just grab everything you can and you're just going forward 100 miles an hour without sometimes self-reflecting and also making sure other people are involved in the process.
Great advice. And I agree with you. I really think that's an issue. And I think the other thing, Chris, we can touch on is that don't be afraid to ask for advice, but you're going to be shocked at how willing people are to share advice with you, fellow entrepreneurs. Has that been your experience? It's certainly been mine.
No, for sure. Especially if somebody understands, like people want to champion you, they want to help you. Then somebody sees success and, they're really good people in life are trying to let others thrive. And, that's one thing about, I think what I've always tried to do. It's, somebody would say, thank you so much. I said, no, you did the work. I just helped with the guidance and I needed to take side. Sometimes you need to take that advice for yourself. You're providing a service. People are taking you back no matter what you do. They love what you do. And I think it's a lot of, it's collaboration. It's how do you work together? I was coaching and collaborating is something that's far underrated.
And what advice would you give to someone that's listening that may be thinking of starting a business?
Well, I'll tell you, I started bootstrap my business, right? So I didn't go out and say that I needed to be the biggest, I need a massive facility, I just got to start it. And I tried to figure out an area where I could get my business. Again, I was running part-time. So you can imagine I'm working 60, 65 hours a week in the NHL. Plus I needed to get a business going. I just partnered up with somebody in the beginning, took a small space, got going, figured out if there was a market for it. Yes, there is. Hired somebody on a part-time basis to work for me, made sure I could control it so I didn't feel the anxiety of, taking on too much. And then just worked with it and was patient and let it go and knew that I had the expertise to make this thing go, but also to understand that I needed the right people in place in order to make it and move it forward.
And is that the advice you'd give to someone is to start part-time if they can, or bootstrap it if they can, versus, kind of jumping all in?
Yeah, for me, it made sense. I had a family, I didn't want to just say, I'm just going to go out and do it. And again, I had credibility within the industry and I could have done that. But along the way, I didn't have to take on things. I would say this to me, I didn't need to take on things. I didn't need to do work that I didn't want to just to have to pay the bills. And I see a lot of people do that and they lose their passion for the business itself because they're so with overhead and they need the best equipment and they need, coaching and in our business of coaching is what really can stitch you. It's not the equipment. It's not everything else. Now, if you have it, it's great. But again, it's not a need. It's a want.
Yeah. I think there's a time and a place for that. To either jump in all in or to do it part-time and bootstrap it. And you made an interesting point. You said, well, my decision or my feeling was, so I think it's a real personal thing. And I think sometimes there's a little bit too much pressure on entrepreneurs that, hey, you're either all in or don't do it. Well, hang on. If they've got a family or they've got bills to pay, they could, if they jump in all in and it doesn't work, it could really have devastating impact on their personal lives. So I think it's a real personal decision. I think Chris is the advice we're both giving here, and you got to think it through. You got to talk to your family or wherever your inner circle of people are, and see if it's the right decision for you.
Yeah, I think people are watching Shark Tank and think somebody's saying, these guys. Well, if you're not going in, there's 100%. I'm not. Well, you remember they're investing millions of dollars in their businesses, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, you have to be as an entrepreneur. Days are tough. There's some great days, but at the end of the day, you need to be able to feel like you can look in the mirror and feel like, this is what I want to do and put some time in now. And like I said, to me, the most important part is that I didn't have to lose my identity in the business. So that's something that I really held high.
Chris, before we went live, you were telling me about some of the good work you do in the community. Can you share with our listeners some of that work?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we've got involved with a little bit with Soldier On last year when they partnered up with the Senators and actually were nice enough to ask us. And we went in and just did some, things and showed them how athletes perform, and we extrapolate that to what they're on, how they move, and just as a business giving back, not only from a branding point of view, but we're a community-based business. If people, Ottawa's a small place. If you're just out for the dollar and you're just out to push your business and promote your business all the time, you're also not getting the feedback and the feel good part of why we do this. We're in a coaching business. Could we go into a business that maybe was more successful financially? Yes, probably. But that's not really why we're around. And, just being involved in the community with the community baseball, with the Ottawa Canadians who just recently changed over. We're always working with, young aspiring coaches who are coming up as well. So I think that's been pretty rewarding over the years. And again, just to see the number of athletes for us that come back, when they're 30 years old, they've been in school for 4 years, or they're coming out, they have law degrees, and those are a lot of things. You put in more time probably in our business than is on the return side of things. It's just the nature of the business, and I think those are things that we've done over the years, and pretty proud of them.
That's great, Chris. Thanks for doing this today. Before we let you go, where can our listeners find out more about you and your company?
We're at www.fitquest.ca. So you can check us out a little bit more there. It gives a little more background of where we are, locations, and yeah.
Great. Thanks again, Chris. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks.
If your company or organization is looking to improve your marketing, go to the Extension Marketing website at extensionmarketing.com and book a discovery call today.